So in my last video, we talked about New Land Records' latest release of Jazz Contrasts by Kenny Dorham. Guess what? They have another album that is coming out the very same day, November 17th, and that is the John Wright Trio's Nice and Tasty, originally put out on Prestige. So today what we're going to talk about is this latest release, and I have the benefit of being able to do a comparison with the original pressing. So that's the topic for today. As usual, hit subscribe, hit like, hit the notification bell, and head over to Instagram and follow me at what_can_brown. All right, so as usual, a little history, then we're going to do a packaging comparison, then we're going to talk about the music. It's kind of like, this is pretty standard stuff at this point. So let's talk about the history of this album by, again, John Wright, Chicago musician, pianist, actually. So this album was originally recorded on November 8th in 1960. It's about 2 months after South Side Soul, which was also the man's nickname, but the album South Side Soul was recorded again, just 2 months prior. And Nice and Tasty was released in 1961, so it was recorded at the end of 1960, released just a couple months later probably. Joining him here we have J.C. Hurd on drums. We also have Wendell Marshall on bass. In terms of the format, or actually, no, really, I guess the content of this album, there's 4 standards, so 4 jazz standards, and then there's 4 original compositions as well. So John Wright is a little bit of I would say a relatively unknown musician unless you're in this kind of jazz vinyl space where that's all you think about, because then you're aware of South Side Soul, you're aware of the sort of reputation of that album as well as the value. And South Side Soul, I think, remains to be probably his most popular record. But I would argue that Nice and Tasty deserves much wider recognition because it's fantastic. So anyway, the story behind this guy is that he had a kind of a long career, I suppose, even before these albums were put out. In terms of playing piano at a young age, he entered the Army, he came out of the Army, he was playing in Chicago. There's like a whole history. In fact, you know what? There's actually a really interesting article that somebody pointed me to, and I'm going to link it in the description so you can check it out. But basically, cutting to a little bit later, the story goes that a Prestige Records scout was in Chicago, heard him play, basically bought him a plane ticket. He went out to New York, ended up at Rudy Van Gelder's, cutting his first 5 sessions that he would record between 1960 and 1962. So Nice and Tasty happens to be his second in that kind of string of albums. Unfortunately, things pretty rapidly took a sad turn as he developed a problem with alcohol, which really derailed his career. He was in and out of hospitals really throughout the 70s, and he supposedly didn't get himself together until 1980 when he entered AA. For those folks outside the US, or maybe you have it outside of the US, I don't know, Alcoholics Anonymous. He then, after getting himself clean, became a librarian for the Cook County Library System, and he ended up retiring from that position in 1999. I think later on, even after retirement, he kind of came back to music. And he recorded, I think, or not recorded, but performed at least into the early 2000s up until his death. So the thing is that this window that he recorded for Prestige really was kind of the only time that he recorded. And so these few albums that he did put out are just highly prized by appreciators of this music. And I think at the time when he was recording these albums, he was really leading one of the, even if he didn't realize it and nobody realized it at the time, I think he was leading one of the best trios at that moment. All right, so now that you know a little bit of the background, the album. So again, New Land Records, a label out of the UK, they've been releasing just fabulous reissues of classic jazz records. And this is one of a couple anyway that have come out this calendar year. They're in the process actually of putting out a Charles Mingus box set, which I'm really excited about. So John Wright Trio, though, this title is super interesting, and I think for a couple of reasons. So one is that this hasn't had a reissue in quite some time. So it was originally put out on Prestige, again, 1961, was released just a couple of years later on Status. I don't know the exact time period. My guess is it was probably like 1964 or so. The problem with Status Records, it was a Prestige subsidiary. They almost always pressed on recycled vinyl and almost always had an incredible hiss to the record. Now, what I have been told, even though I've never owned this copy in its Status pressing, somebody told me that actually the Status pressings of this don't have recycled vinyl, which I think is very interesting. Don't hold me accountable to that. That's just what I heard. But that would be a nice way to hear this record, and in a early but not necessarily as expensive edition as the say the original. But in any event, outside of that status pressing, it has not had a US reissue in any format. Not on CD. There's no digital tracks. In fact, I don't even think on like I don't think you can get this on Spotify. I don't think you can like pull in the tracks on Instagram and post it. I just don't think it's out there. It's probably something on YouTube that you can still preview. But in any event, it has not been available in the US really in any format. There have been at least one, possibly two reissues on vinyl in Japan. There's also a CD. So in any event, and I think those are in the 90s, in any event, this is just a really unavailable album to hear. So that's one reason it's kind of interesting. The other is that this is in stereo, which is just super interesting because the original was never put out on stereo. The status wasn't on stereo. I don't even think some of those Japanese releases were on stereo. This could be the first time that it's on stereo. Possibly the Japanese CD. I have no idea. But in any event, the fact that this is available in the US and on stereo, which a lot of people have never heard, is really, really exciting. So in terms of the content here and where they sourced it, well, it was sourced from the original stereo master tapes by Kevin Gray. This is an officially licensed recording. And again, it's kind of the quality that you'd expect from Newland. It was pressed at Palace, 180 gram vinyl, etc. All right, so I did this with a Kenny Dorham title just the other day in the video that I posted. I'm going to do it again with this one. I want to just do a quick comparison of the covers just so you know what you're going to get, because I know a lot of people are purists with this stuff. They want it to look exactly like the original item, and that's just not exactly what Newland does. It's not exactly what Craft Recordings is doing. There's a lot of labels that are just not they're not trying to do that, and so I just want to point it out because it actually doesn't bother me, but I know it's important to some folks. So this is what the original cover looks like, as you can see, and what the this is what the Newland cover looks like. What the original cover looks like is this. So the things that you can see, I would say most notably, is the lack of prestige and the original catalog number. They don't have that here because Newland puts their own catalog numbers and their own brand on these editions. Otherwise, the main difference here is that the original is a laminated cover. Newland doesn't do that. They do these very nice matte finish covers that are super sturdy, and it looks very nice. It's just that it's not this, right? So some people really want that laminated cover, and that's just not what Newland is doing. In terms of the back, this is the original. You can see mine's a preview copy, and you can kind of see the format, and here you can see Newland. So this actually is a lot closer to the original compared to the Kenny Dorham Jazz Contracts album, to where really it's just Newland 007. So their seventh release, and then Prestige 7197 is the main difference here. And then towards the bottom, you can see as well, right? Newland is going to include their logo, whereas obviously here you're going to have the original kind of Prestige sort of details. Now, one thing that you do get, which you also got with Kenny Dorham, is you get a photo insert. So I showed it on the other title, and I personally think this is, again, another fantastic photo of John Wright, super high quality, and it's just kind of a nice thing. Like, they weren't going to make these gatefold, probably for a variety of reasons, but in any event, it's really nice. And on the back, just like on, actually trying to remember if on the back of the other one there was anything. But anyway, on the back of this one, you have the original Downbeat review, which gave it 3.5 stars. And yeah, I just think it's just super cool that they would include that, I think. All right, so I mentioned that this is in stereo and possibly for the first time. And so I find that just to be kind of an interesting detail, I suppose, that not only is this potentially, again, the first time, but also that they would choose for it to for this title to be in stereo. And I actually did pose the question to the label, and they responded, and what they said was they wanted to release this title, and this is what Concord, because Concord and Kraft kind of still own the Prestige catalog, the stereo tapes are what they made available. So that could either mean that that's all they wanted to make available for whatever reason, or it could mean that the original mono tapes are not in great shape. And so, who knows, or maybe they're even lost, right? We really have no idea. All we know is that Newland reached out to them, and the stereo tapes were what was made available. And I just think that that was a very kind of fortuitous occurrence because the stereo edition just sounds phenomenal. It really does. And I, I've got this this original mono that's in really nice shape, and so I feel like I have a good ability to kind of compare these two things, at least on my setup. So tangibly, what you have is with the stereo soundstage is you have John Wright in the left channel, you have drums in the right, and you have bass that is center. So the danger here might be that if you're the sort of person who's sort of allergic to the ping pong effect or the sort of panned effect between left and right channel, and you feel like, I'm looking different ways depending on which instrument is playing, I actually think that that is not an issue here. And here's the reason why. Not only do you have bass that kind of carries things across, drums, and I don't know why. It could be the placement of my subwoofer. I'm not exactly sure, but it almost feels like most of the kit is in the right channel, but some of the cymbals are a little bit left of right. And so what I feel like, at least in how I experience this music, is that it feels like there's a little bit better of a blend rather than it being these very distinct things of exactly where the instruments are. It feels like it's a little bit blended, even though it's a stereo format. So what I feel like you get is you get the benefits of the stereo, but you also don't have, say, the pitfalls of stereo where, again, you kind of have that sort of ping pong effect between left and right channel. All right, so similar to the Kenny Dorham title that Newland just put out, I actually think that my thoughts on this one are pretty cut and dry as well, but in a different way. So with Jazz Contrast by Kenny Dorham, I think some of my comments were basically that it was an improvement on the original because the original was inherently inferior because it was recorded in 1957 and it was by Riverside and it wasn't great and like balance of instruments and all that. Things change when you're talking about a trio, and I think there's a lot more room for error because there's only 3 instruments, and especially because we're going to stereo, and all of a sudden they're split apart. You don't have that kind of benefit of them all just being like kind of hitting you at once. So where my head is at on this one is that I actually think, despite the fact that Newland's edition is in stereo and the original is mono, I think that the headline here is that this edition is a really nice reproduction of the original pressing. And I do think that there's actually some improvements, but there's also a few differences. But overall, it's an excellent reproduction of the original. It doesn't change the sound in any material way. What I would say is that the bass is almost consistent across the 2 pressings. Like the bass is just as prominent. It's not more boomy. It's not less audible. The bass is there. I would say that it is, there's a little bit more on the low end with this reissue, which I think is really, really nice. But it's not like, it's just not, it's, I don't want to say it's barely perceptible. It is perceptible, but it doesn't hit you in the face, I guess is my point. In terms of the drums are also just as audible, but this is the biggest difference between these two. There's much more sonic detail with the drums and especially the cymbals on the Newland reissue compared to the original. They just don't shimmer as much. They're not as like, again, I don't know if splashy is the right word, but detail is the right word. There's not as much detail on the original as there is on the Newland edition. Now, the piano also sounds a little bit different, and that is actually that I think the piano level seems to be just a little bit softer on the Newland edition. I don't think, though, that you're losing actually any of the you're not losing any sonic material. It just feels like it's a little bit softer coming out of that left channel than when you have it sort of spread in the mono format, and it's a little bit hotter, I think, on the original pressing. And so, yeah, it just seems just a little bit more prominent on the original pressing and a little bit less on the Newland. And it may actually be that it's better balanced on the Newland. It's just I'm used to hearing that original pressing. So that's like kind of the high level differences, but these are just minutia because what you will experience is certainly the full beauty of the album when you hear it in stereo in the Newland edition, and you're definitely gonna hear more detail. There's not really a noise floor to get rid of between these two pressings per se. Like, I didn't really notice much. I think the original Prestige recording was just done very, very well. So I don't think they needed to correct or change anything for that. But I think certainly the Newland edition is more sonic detail, and even if you're not the sort of person who pays attention to those kind of subtleties, where you will hear it is almost any time that that JC Hurd is hitting those cymbals, and it just hits you like in a different way. And I think it's on what's the track here? I already closed this up. It's on the track "The Very Thought of You," which is probably my favorite one in the entire album. It's kind of like a slower ballad, and there is just so much kind of magic, I think, that JC Hurd's cymbals add to the music in the Newland edition that it just didn't hit me the same way when I listened to the mono. And so, like I said, I think that the high level is that they're very, very similar, but those differences that are just here and there throughout the album really make me think that that the Newland edition is just a fantastic way to hear the music, even though it's in stereo. So I don't really want to belabor the point. I mean, I feel like even just those high level comments kind of extend across the tracks. It's pretty consistent. I just think they did a really good job with both of these. Now, I will say, similar to the other video where I talked about jazz contrast, this is an album that I did not pay for and that Newland sent to me, and here I am talking about it. I don't have the ability. I think if anybody's seen my KB Blues review, I don't have even though I paid for that one, I don't have the ability to not say what I think in these videos. That maybe that's a personality flaw of mine. And so I again, like I said in the past one, I hope people trust that I'm representing this in the way, at least that I hear it in this room on my setup, and especially comparing, like I did with the Kenny Dorham, comparing the two pressings. I think that this is just a really nice addition. I think that this presentation that Newland is doing, I would say, rivals a lot of what Kraft does on their own. Certainly Kraft's partnership with Acoustic Sounds on their Contemporary Records series. Where there's like a little bit of a difference, I think, in philosophy is Blue Note with Tone Poet, Acoustic Sounds with the Verve series, where I feel like they're really going for that audiophile kind of treatment, where it just in some ways it sounds different than the original in a measurable way. And I think the similarities between where I'm talking about Newland and what Kraft is doing with Contemporary and such, I feel like it's a little bit more of doing the original material justice without changing it in any material way, but still extracting a little bit more from those master tapes and making it the best that it can possibly sound. Again, without kind of distracting you, I guess, with the sort of audiophile-ness of the record. So I'm a huge fan of this thing. I know this is going to get a lot of spins. I said it in my Instagram review. There's like legitimately moments on this that give me goosebumps, and I did not feel that way when I listened to because I listened to the mono first and then I listened to the stereo just so I could really feel the impact. I think folks who either are familiar with the mono are going to be really excited about this, and certainly if you've never heard this music, man, this is it's just fantastic, and I'm glad that John Wright is getting a little bit more attention. I know everybody's going to be excited for somebody to tackle Southside Soul. Let's be real, it might be end up being Kraft, because I think they put it out in their OJC series, whereas this never made OJC. So in any event, we'll see what happens with that. But at the very least, I mean, this rivals Southside Soul. It really does. This is a fantastic album, possibly a little bit more understated, but just I'm a huge fan and really excited that Newland decided to tackle it. So those are my thoughts. If you're watching this video, it's likely that it's going to be probably about a week before I post my next one. And I don't think no one's going to complain about that, because I've been on a little bit of a tear. I've been trying to hit 100 videos by the end of the year, because I started in September of last year, and I was looking at my numbers and I was like, it'd be fun to hit 100 by the end of the year. But taking a break for the Thanksgiving holiday, and then which no one's going to perceive, and then I'll be back posting as soon as that weekend's over. So great way, I think, to end. I know this is like heading into Record Store Day, and people are excited about that. If you haven't watched my Record Store Day preview, which covers all the jazz titles, maybe I'll link that in the description too, or go search for it, check it out. So yeah, thanks for your attention. As always, I'll see you next time.